Okay, I think. All right. So it's going to be the 14th Amendment. It's the last slide before we hit a review. So I think once we cover it, I'll just keep going because we reviewed everything else. I tell you what, I've got one little thing I'm going to do with it. So the 14th Amendment, it's bed, spells out bed, B-E-D, born in the USA. Coming off of Dred Scott right there. So Dred Scott got taken to the north. Hey, I'm, what is it? Recommending, in addition to basketball shows, actual shows. So you got, Hell on Wheels on Netflix about Transcontinental Railroad. Really like it. Underground, about the Underground Railroad. As Luke put it, it's a prison break with slaves. And it's suspenseful and it's good. And then last night, American Crime. American Crime is about immigration this season. All right, but Dred Scott, so kind of combining two of those shows there. Dred Scott got taken to the north. Supreme Court ruled he can't sue because his property, he's not a citizen. You got to be a citizen, according to the Supreme Court, in the Dred Scott case, to sue. The 14th Amendment is the response to Dred Scott. So it says, anybody born in the United States, automatically a citizen. And so that was response to Dred Scott. But today, that part of the 14th Amendment is all about what? Immigration. So folks can come from Mexico without permission. They have kids here in the United States. Those kids born in the United States, automatically citizens. So that's part of the immigration debate. That young lady there is a citizen. Her parents had gotten deported. All right. So it's coming straight out of the 14th Amendment there. All right. The next two are civil rights movement-y stuff. Basically what the civil rights movement was pushing for. Equal protection, it's called the Equal Protection Clause. No person, no, it doesn't say citizen, person, shall be denied the equal protection of the laws. And so that's what the Civil Rights Act is doing. You know, when the Civil Rights is back, you're not going to have passed, you're not going to have white and colored on restrooms, drinking fountains. It's ended segregation, and the justification of it is this part of the 14th Amendment. And then, as we said when we were talking about due process, the last part of it is due process applied to the states. All right, so states, no state can take away life, liberty, or property without due process of laws. So 3 parts. Yeah.
I think I might have asked this, but I don't know if I ever got an answer. How does whatchamacallit, Guantanamo Bay not get found unconstitutional based on 14th? Because there's no person shall be denied the equal protection of laws, but people in Guantanamo Bay aren't provided speedy trials or trials at all.
So, I mean, number 6 is the big one on Guantanamo, speedy trial. This one also. At this point, I'm going to say yes, you have, and yes, I haven't answered yet because I believe it's the first slide in the second heading. But I'll go ahead and answer the question. What is the legal status of people in Guantanamo? Enemy combatants. So that's what the Bush administration designated terror suspects. And as an enemy, basically a POW, prisoner of war. And that gives them a special legal status that has less rights. Now, their lawyers argue that, 14th Amendment is being violated, and especially the 6th Amendment is being violated, and so it's a legal question that people argue over, and so their lawyers would be using the same reasoning that you are. But, the Bush administration, when it set up Guantanamo, described them legally as basically prisoners of war, and when you're a prisoner of war, you don't have quite the same legal status as other prisoners. All right, so you got the 14th Amendment. Hey, don't look, be for what? If you're born in the United States, you are a citizen. E for what? Equal protection, D for due process. Okay, now, up here on the 5th, remember we got to the 5th Amendment, it was the end of the period, and so quite a few folks were struggling with all 5 of those. But let's see. Fifth Amendment, you got two sets of two, and then the grand jury. All right, so it goes two things. So what do we know about Fifth Amendment? Self-incrimination. What court case goes with that? Miranda. So you got those two things. All right, then you've got OJ. OJ is what? So then you got D&D. Double jeopardy, due process to the states. And then think to yourself, well, the Fifth Amendment is a big one. Another definition of the word grand is great big. All right, so grand jury there. All right, so let's get that learned once for all. Turn to each other without looking at anything. Tell each other all five of those right now.
I think it's the national government.
What?
Due process as a national
Great. Now, rather than say these five things, you're just laying back and smiling. You know, this is the time. This is the time that you learn it.
Got it.
Don't pray. Let's look and say, all right, tell me off. I don't know, Dad. All right, tell me that. What kind of friends are y'all being? All right,
What's the 3 words anybody can ever say? I got it.
that's right, baby. All right, listen. We'll go straight down the roads one time, and then Zach will tell us all five. All right, we'll turn to each other for 30 seconds and actually say these words to each other rather than the dang. So, two things with self-incrimination, 2 D's, and then it's a great big amendment. All right, number 1, self-incrimination. 2, brand rights. Give me a D. Give me another D. All right, and Callahan, it's a great big amendment. So what? All right, number 1. Quit looking out of that paper. All right. What goes along? What court case goes along? Miranda rights. Give me a D. Give me a D.
Due process.
All right, give me a great big.
No federal case without a grand jury.
Zach's got all that.
Self-incrimination, due process.
What court case goes with due process? You had the right to remain silent. What are those things called? Mm-hmm.
Due process.
It's a great big amendment. It's muy grande.
Oh. It's the one if you're born here.
Grand jury. Grand jury. All right. Push yourself on this. I mean, I will take you against the field on something that we call some big idea that we covered in October. You know, I cover something, I'm saying, Zach's going to know it, nobody else is. All right, but on the details, I mean, and I'm the same way, we have to push ourselves. All right, number next one. Okay, selective incorporation, and I'll call it officially number 1. Okay, and we've said this, and my theory of the case here is if it's some kind of technical word that we've never heard before, I was going to put it a couple times on different slides to help it stick. Because Dred Scott, we say it again a couple times, hey, you remember it again. But this is not something that we're in any way familiar with from U.S. history. Okay, so we got a case right here, Barron versus Baltimore. And Barron versus Baltimore was 1833, and it said the Bill of Rights only applies to the national government. Doesn't apply to the states. Let's check our comprehension and memorization. What's the court case that's going to incorporate free speech to the states? It's going to get free speech down low to the states?
Get low.
Get low. All right, so that's the get low case. All right, Barron versus Baltimore. So it makes sense. All right, so we all go back to 1787 or 1788 when they're writing the Bill of Rights. Why would they not say this applies to the states? Why would it only apply to the national government? And by the way, while you're pondering that question, I got you a Jolly Rancher question. What is the first word of the Bill of Rights? No, that's the first word of the Constitution. We the people. The first word of the Bill of Rights. The first word of the First Amendment. It's going to start the Establishment Clause. No. Congress. Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion. So it's limiting the power of Congress. Why? What's the purpose of the Bill of Rights? To make the anti-federalists feel okay that the national government's not getting too much power. What are the anti-federalists concerned about? They're concerned about people's rights being taken away, but also states' rights being taken away. These are states' rights, folks. So you wouldn't be limiting the power of states in a document set up to make folks feel better that the states are not losing too much power. So it's going to be a later thing that this stuff gets applied to the states. All right, in the 20th century, over time, the court has gradually incorporated certain amendments to apply to the states. Get those in 1925. By the end of the 30s, almost everything in the First Amendment had been applied to the states. In the 1960s, all the due process stuff gets applied to the states. So what, Gideon, about having a lawyer, Miranda is 19, both of those are about 1965, somewhere in there. So the due process in the 60s, that's part of the concern that Republicans had with, who's the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court in the 1960s? Warren, Earl Warren. All right, so Marshall was the Chief Justice way back when, Marbury versus Madison. Thurgood Marshall was the first
Black justice.
but he was never a Chief Justice. All right, so it's the first, so Johnson put him on there. So this is the Warren Court that's expanding civil liberties quite a bit. And we were just now we were elected Nixon in U.S. history, and we said one of the things Republicans were worried about the 60s and the 70s was you had rising crime, and the Supreme Court seems to be on the side of the criminals. Because it's expanding the rights of the accused. You got a right to a lawyer, you got a right to remain silent, that sort of thing. So states have to follow due process in the 60s. So it's a two-stepper. All right. Here's another Jolly Rancher. Somebody's going to get it right. What's the last of the amendments? The amendment most recently incorporated. Most recently applied to the states. Going once, going twice, going 3 times. Now I give you a hint. If Beck were here, he'd get it right. I think.
The last one given to the states.
Mm-hmm. The last one that was applied to the states.
Something about
Yeah. So amendment number what? 2. Second amendment. All right, I don't know. Something have to do. All right. Something have to do with guns. Well, we have the Second Amendment there. I get. I don't know. All right. We'll put them right there. But the Second Amendment's the last one. In the last few years. The Seventh Amendment, the jury trial hadn't, and then the Third Amendment, no quartering. There's never been anything about quartering. Okay. All right. The government's got to perform a balancing act. It's got to balance individual rights, our individual rights and liberties, against the public interest. All right, now, you don't have to copy down that whole thing if you don't want to. You can just put an arrow and put internment camps. So clearly, the civil liberties of the Japanese Americans in World War II were being taken away. Why? Because the national interest was such that everybody's afraid they were going to be spies. So the national interest was more important to Roosevelt and to the Supreme Court in Korematsu than those individual liberties were. There's no question that these people's rights were being taken away. They hadn't done anything. But you had those security concerns, so they outweighed the individual liberties. The prohibition one, I think, is a real interesting case. Okay? I don't currently drink at all. Once upon a time, I would have a few Coors Lights. And when I was teaching at Northwest Whitfield and we were doing prohibition, we were doing U.S. history, we'd have a lively discussion of this article written by this guy who was in favor of prohibition. And he described how bad women and kids were getting beat up by drunk husbands. And so I'd say, well, was it a good idea? And they'd say, well, no. Because what about the moderate drinker? And then I would say, okay, I'm a moderate drinker. Let's balance my rights to drink a Coors Light or two versus the right of the kids of the drunk. So it's not the drunk's right to drink versus his kid's right not to get beat. It's everybody's individual rights to have, their moderate amount of alcohol versus the kids' right not to get beat. And which one's more important? And framed in that way, we were all, including me, convinced that the 18th Amendment was a dang good thing. And maybe it was, but then the public interest of let's not have Al Capone run around Chicago shooting the place up outweighed the individual interests of those little kids there. But when this thing comes along, the guy's, he was a preacher named Billy Sunday, had been a former pro baseball player. And he says, everybody talks about individual liberty, but individual liberty is not for the wife. Individual liberty is not for the kid. Individual liberty, and he just goes through all these people who are victims of alcohol, and by the end of it, you're just about nodding your head. Let's get rid of it. Now, I'm not saying it's good that we brought it back, but that balancing act was right there in that issue. Okay. All right. And then we bring back some of these issues that we've been talking about a little bit. All right. Racial profiling. Black Lives Matter. Those issues. Minorities concerned by racial profiling by the police. Ooh, here we go. Jolly Rancher. What New York policing policy drastically decreased crime? So, folks in New York City were entitled to a safe environment, but if you looked a certain way, if you were black and you were wearing baggy clothes, the police were going to stop you and frisk you. So you felt like your individual rights were being violated. They probably were. What New York City was saying was a safe New York City was more important than those individual rights. Why is it that you now have Black Lives Matter, that you now have this very good Netflix movie recommended to me by Zach that gets you when you watch it, you're very concerned about unfair sentencing for minorities? Why is this coming up now? Why is this happening now? Crime's low. Crime's at an all-time low. When crime was at an all-time high in the late 80s with the Crips and the Bloods and the cocaine wars and all that sort of thing, everybody was on board with get tough policing. So when Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton kind of had to apologize for stop and frisk and, the 3 strikes and you're out, the different policies that put people in prison for a long time, now they're having to apologize for it. In the 80s and 90s, when crime was so high, straight out of Compton years, there were very few people talking about civil liberties. Most folks were talking about, even within those communities, what are we going to do to get these gangs under control? All right, but hey, it's changed because crime has gone down. And you do have a lot of people in prison for a long time for minor drug offenses. Why is the movie called 13th? Well, it is the 13th Amendment. There's a little clause that I wasn't even aware of in the 13th Amendment until I watched the movie. What is it?
Slavery is illegal except for punishment of crime.
Yep. It says slavery is illegal except if you're being punished for a crime. And then, what the words say. Now, we just think, oh, well, that, you can interpret that as saying, well, if you get punished for a crime, you're going to have your freedom taken away. But a strict reading of it might be that slavery is illegal, but slavery is legal if somebody has been convicted of a crime, was the argument. And so then you start, the video shows all these guys have been in prison for a long time, and by the end of it, I don't know, I was feeling, even though I'm a little skeptical of the movement, a little Black Lives Matter. I was feeling like, something's got to be done here. And you're troubled about the sacrifice of the individual liberties in the name of public order at a time when crime's really not that high. So it's this balancing act. Okay, drug sentences Who's that? Why is she there? Why is she there? She got convicted of possession of powder cocaine, which is the cocaine of choice for the Hollywood elite at Hollywood parties. And when she got convicted, she went to jail for a couple of days, very short amount of time. On the other hand, somebody can get life sentences for what?
Cocaine.
Crack cocaine. So it's basically poor man's cocaine versus rich man's cocaine, or black versus white cocaine. And in the war on drugs, late 80s, early 90s, these very get tough policies were enacted, and the result is, what's the result? Lower crime and a lot of people in prison for a very long time for nonviolent drug offenses. And so now that crime is lower. People looking at it. And the person who has looked at it most closely is, who's that? We've seen him before. He was Obama's Attorney General, Eric Holder. And in the Obama years, so I covered up my little bar graph, but you can see it. The bar graph says the amount of cocaine possession that it requires to get something like 5 years in prison. And powder cocaine is 500 grams to get much time in prison. Crack cocaine is 5 grams to get much time in prison. That got straightened out. That disparity was evened up during the Obama years, and his Attorney General, Eric Holder, was pretty responsible for it. Okay, then we have OJ again. Why do we have OJ this time? When he got arrested, there's the Time and Newsweek covers. What happened?
Oh, he got put in jail for like 35
Yeah, there's the Time and Newsweek covers. What happened? Time made him blacker, darkened him to make him look more menacing, to make him look more like a criminal. That's OJ. That's Time's version of OJ to make him look more criminal. In college in the past, this psychological experiment's been done. It says which one looks more like a criminal. And I don't know when. Seems to me that if this was done today, people wouldn't fall for it. But at whatever point it was done, the respondent said, well, this guy looks more like a criminal. Okay, what's the problem? It's the same guy. They just darken his skin or lighten his skin in order to run the experiment there. All right, but the discrepancy in sentencing is an issue when you're looking at public interest versus individual liberties. All right, hey, everybody look at it. Learn it right now. Turn to each other. Don't talk about basketball. Don't talk about the Final Four. Don't talk about politics. Don't talk about bowling. All right? Talk about the answers to those questions. On your mark, say go.
Individual rights against
What do you go to that said to 1950?
All right. 10 more seconds. Time. I'm starting over here. Sam, tell me about Barron versus Baltimore.
The Bill of Rights doesn't apply to the states.
That's right. Okay. Griffin, selective corporation. All right. Gradually. Gives the power to the states. What does it do? Doesn't give power to the states. Just the opposite, right? What does it do? Takes power away because it's incorporating the Bill of Rights. Limits on the powers of state governments. Tally, what do the governments have to balance concerning these things? With what? The greater whatchamacallit. Give me a word for whatchamacallit. That's what we got to do. We know the ideas. We got to give them words.
I guess the public interest.
Yeah, that's right. Public interest. You could say the greater good, which means the same thing. All right. I think we know internment camps. All right. Brian, race and roads. What's the deal? Racial disparities in sentencing. Okay, there you go, Maddox. You've been waiting for 2 days, and there's one time.
This is number 2.
Yeah. All right. So it's Muslims versus public interest ever since 9/11. So I believe I will now tell a story. I think I probably told y'all this in U.S. history, maybe, but it's been a little while. So, hey, number one, why should you pick UCLA? Because I was born on UCLA campus. So those are my homeboys right there. Now, we moved when I was 1, so I don't remember it very well, but I was born on UCLA campus. So there are McKenzie's out in California. I think it was the last time we were out there. No, 2 times ago. It was about 2006. Just me and Miss McKenzie flew out to California to visit Cousin John. So we got into, W is present, walking through the Atlanta airport, and the whole time we're hearing, if anyone looks suspicious, please report them. Anywhere you went in the Atlanta airport, there was heightened security, heightened fears about terrorism. So then we go to our little terminal, and we're sitting there, and CNN's on, and Bush is giving a speech on terrorism. Okay, so I got terror on my mind the whole time, and starting to get a little nervous about flying. So then we get on the plane. We're sitting in the back. To our right, to our front, to our back, Arab Americans in traditional Muslim dress. And all of a sudden, I started doing what? My profile. In my mind, I started getting nervous. Now, we had a nice, smooth flight. I felt guilty about it, especially when one of the guys. So then one of the guys goes to the bathroom. Now that made me especially nervous because you had just had a terror suspect who had been arrested with a bomb in the bathroom that he had hidden in his underwear or something like that. That was very much on everybody's mind. He comes out of the bathroom and he's feeling bad, he's feeling sick to his stomach, so I felt all guilty about it. But in my mind, I did some profiling right there. All right, and so that's an issue that's been going on since 9/11. All right, and Guantanamo comes out of 9/11. So these folks have been held without trial, not given the equal protection of the laws, and not given the right to a speedy trial for a long time. And Guantanamo's back in the news because Obama was pretty anti-Guantanamo. One of the first things he did was sign an executive order closing Guantanamo. So now we know exactly how much power an executive order necessarily has. Just because you sign it doesn't mean it's going to happen. And then Trump is much more pro-Guantanamo. And 60 Minutes, I hadn't seen it, but they interviewed a guy on 60 Minutes who had been at Guantanamo. So here's my Guantanamo question. Let's look at our guys right here. How many guys we got? About 10? Let's say that 8 of them, now let's go half and half. No, I don't want that. We'll go 8. 8 of them are guilty, 2 of them are innocent. We don't know who's guilty or innocent because they haven't been a trial. You get suspected of terrorism. The thinking is they're enemy combatants. You don't have time. And by the way, why do you not have a trial for somebody you want to talk about? What would happen if you put one of these guys on trial? Possibly. Oh. What would happen? If you've ever watched Law and Order, what happens when the guilty guy gets away? The evidence would get thrown out, especially if the evidence was gained through some sort of enhanced interrogation technique. So the thinking of the Bush administration was, if we give these guys a trial, some of them are going to get out. Some of these guys are both guilty and there's not enough evidence to convict in a criminal court. They will then get out and they'll do some awful terror bombing, and then we'll all be sorry that we respected their civil liberties. So that's the war justification for not giving them a trial. Okay, and for designating them enemy combatants. All right, so I'm now saying that 8 of them are guilty. These 2 guys right here in front of you are not guilty. Okay? In order to let these guys go, you have to give all of them a trial. And some of them will probably get out. All right, turn to each other. How many of you are going to give them all trial in order to make sure these two innocent guys go free? You decide what's it going to be. You get a trial or not a trial? And then once you decide, I want to know, and we're going to go Old Testament here. I want to know what your ratio is. In other words, what? In the book of Genesis, Lot's living in Sodom. I think it's Lot. And Sodom's this awful place. God's going to come and destroy the whole place. And then I guess Abraham. All right, maybe it's Isaac. All right, Abraham said, well, if there's 100 nice people here, will you keep it? So he said, yeah. If there's 100 nice people. But then you can't find 100 nice people. So he said, well, what about if there's 20 nice people? Oh, yeah. If there's 20, but then you can't find 20. So then he says, what if there's 2? And so you have to look at what your ratio of innocent to guilty is in order to protect the innocent. All right. So to protect these 2 guys, you're going to give everybody a trial. In which case, some guilty people might go free. And what's your ratio? All right. You've got 30 seconds to decide all that stuff.
I guess it was 2 now, but more. There was like 5. There was like 5 of them.
Because they have a chance.
It is.
There were 5 that were innocent.
But it has to be basically reverse from what he said. It has to be 8 innocents to every 2 guilty parties.
8 innocents?
But how are you supposed to?
Oh my gosh.
Okay, so I'm in charge. I'm the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court and the President and Speaker of the House and everything else. I got all power. There's 10 of y'all. Okay, 2 of them are innocent. So Sam, should I give these other folks a trial in order to make sure that innocent you goes free? No.
Nope.
Why not?
Because if you let even 2 of the criminals go, that means that you've basically gone 1 for 2. You've gotten 2 innocents out at the cost of 2 guilty getting out, and criminals tend to go back to do more crimes. Therefore, you've probably caused greater destruction in the future.
So if it was you, you'd be willing to sacrifice your entire future for the greater good to make sure that you stay in Guantanamo forever. You would want the government to keep you in Guantanamo forever in order to make sure those innocent guys, those guilty guys don't get let out.
Yep. While I was there, I would hate my life and I would hate the government.
Nobody thinks like that.
If it was actually you, I feel like you would say, I
Yeah,
want to try.
nobody thinks like
If you
that.
were in that position, theoretically, I guess you could say.
And what does Rawls say? Let's go all the way back. Somebody was asking me about, William Long was asking me about Kant yesterday. Rawls, remember Rawls? What does he say? When you're setting up a just system of government. If you're going to set up a theory of justice, the key to that is,
Oh, is that like a speed limit thing? Or?
What's the key to a theory of justice?
Blind justice?
You've got to not know who you're going to be in society. So, we in politics, the problem with interest groups politics is, hey, we all, our tendency is to say, all right, this is what we want from politics. Give us more stuff. We want more stuff for us, and we want the other folks to get less stuff. And we're always kind of concerned with people like us. But, of course, Madison says none of us are fit to be judged in our own case. We're all prejudiced. So what you need to do, if you set up the rules of a society like the United States, you got to not know whether you're going to start out, you're going to be born to a family that's rich or poor, black or white or Hispanic, what your parents are going to, it's got to be from outside. It's got to be from the original position where you've got no idea what your personal characteristics are going to be. Because most of us are not like Sam. If it was me, I'd want them to let me out. Yep.
Let me fire back.
Okay.
What if you go and only one of them, okay? 2 innocent guys and 1 guilty guy get out, but the 1 guilty guy goes and blows up the Empire State Building and kills 100,000 people. Was that worth it?
If it's me,
I think it is.
it depends on who you are. Depends on who you are. And what is it? Well, what we talked about in middle too. It's the greater good for the greater number. It's the problem of the what? Problem of the what? And then we had this silly little cartoon that went with it, coming up with all kinds of. It's the problem of a lifeboat, you know. In order to, and then we did like a train thing. The problem with a lifeboat is there's 10 people in a lifeboat and only hold 7. In order for the lifeboat to not sink, you got to throw 3 people out, which is fine by me as long as I'm one of the 7 as opposed to one of the 3. I think we get the gist of it. And the answer, the answer to Maddox's question is now, yes, their 6th Amendment rights are being violated. No, they're not being given equal protection of the laws. Why is that? For the greater good, for the public interest. And so then you've got to decide, we all have to decide the degree to which we're all right with that.
Wait, who decides on public interest? The government?
Yeah, the Supreme Court. Yeah. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yep, the judges. Mm-hmm. All that. Okay, the Patriot Act. Patriot Act also coming straight out of 9/11. So we got a lot of W here. By the way, just got interviewed. What's W doing? W is turning out to be the nicest man in history who was ever president of the United States. What's he doing? Yeah. W just got interviewed. He's painting war vets from Iraq. And they interviewed him about it. And, it's like his therapy for PTSD victims. And he goes and meets them. And in the interview, he's just a really nice person. In the interview, and you kind of, you just admire him when you listen to him talk. Okay, back then he was all about the public interest because he was, very concerned about the public interest, very concerned about there being not another terror attack. So the Patriot Act was used to wiretap anybody that was suspected of terrorist activity. So we understand what. Problem was, how did you get to be suspected of terrorist activity? Well, you had the wrong last name. You'd have the last name of somebody who somebody had said was in on something, some sort of plot. Or you might be in a college seminar on terrorism and your name came up. They just had this big list of names. And if your name was on the list, well, the Patriot Act said that you could be wiretapped, which seems to violate your what? Right to privacy. All right, so privacy stuff. All right to privacy against the public interest. Okay, and I don't know, the longer the war went, the less popular the Patriot Act became. The Patriot Act was Exhibit A for war opponents, Iraq war opponents. Okay, and then the exclusionary rule. All right, the exclusionary rule says illegal. So now we go all Law and Order and Lenny. Every 4th or 5th Law and Order episode, the detectives get the guy and they know he's guilty, but they can't prove he's guilty. So they beat it out of him some way or another. Or they don't get a warrant before they go into the house. They break the procedural rules a little bit. Then they get the guy, and they know they got him. But then the defense lawyer will come in, and he'll hand this sheet of paper to Jack, the DA, and says, "Here, Jack, motion to suppress. All this, the murder weapon. You're going to throw the murder weapon out because they obtained it illegally." All right, so the exclusionary rule says if you didn't follow procedure, getting the evidence, you can't use it. Again, public interest versus individual liberties. The court case is Matt versus Ohio. It was in the reading. Very well described. Dalry Matt, that's her right here, was suspected of harboring a fugitive. Somebody had done something really bad. And the police believed he was hanging out at her house. So they got a warrant to come look for that guy. All right, they got there, he's not there. But they found 2 things. Jolly Rancher, what did they find? Fine, readers. Found what? They didn't find a gun. Tally, what'd you say? A toothbrush. I do not know if I'm assuming that he had good oral hygiene, and in fact there was a toothbrush there.
What a body.
Yeah, that's what they found. They found stuff that was legally classified as obscene materials. So I know and she got arrested for it. And they didn't go into the details of it. So I don't know why it was classified. But it was classified as obscene. So she got arrested, and she got convicted. The case went to the Supreme Court, and her lawyer said, "Hey, they didn't have a warrant to look for the obscene materials. Because they didn't have a warrant for that, the conviction got thrown out. She got set free." And so the thesis of so many Law and Order episodes, and Law and Order is being filmed in the 90s when crime's real high, is that the exclusionary rule here. It's almost a thesis against the exclusionary rule. The police can't do their job because there's so many hoops they got to jump through in order to get the bad guy. Now, when I was at Gordon Central, I brought in this guy who was a policeman, and I gave him the scenario. All right, I think that this fellow right here has a murder weapon in his house. And I go in there with a warrant for the murder weapon, and instead I find $1 million, and it turns out he's robbed a bank, but I can't arrest him because I don't have a warrant. Does that mean he's going to get away? And the guy said, no. What you can do is you can go ahead and place him in custody without charging him. Go ahead and put the cuffs on him, and your partner sits there with him while you go driving back to the judge's chambers, and you get a warrant and you come back. So that was, according to him, the exclusionary rule doesn't make it that much harder for the police to do their job. But what we need to know is, it's public interest versus individual liberties. The stuff they found got thrown out, and that's called the exclusionary rule. That illegally obtained evidence against Mrs. Knapp was excluded because it was illegal obtained. They didn't follow the rules. All right. Okay. Hey, turn to each other. You got 29 seconds. Say it. If you don't say it, you're going to miss it. Here in just a minute.
Racial profiling.
I think that should be a trial.
Everyone should get a trial. I don't know that one. But Patriot Act was wiretapping, and the criticism that you could tap in somewhere it wasn't.
Patriot Act was making fun of that.
Exclusionary rule.
When you wire into you wouldn't wiretap somebody, do you have to have their phone to tap it?
Zach, we're going to you on that one. The best TV show in the history of all TV shows is The Wire, which is about putting a wire on drug dealers.
Chris won't watch it. I tried to get into it.
I've been debating so much.
You gotta watch it, man. It's the best one. It's better than any of them.
I was watching the
But Zach would be the expert on wiretapping. This goes on and all that
The
stuff.
slave version of Prison Break.
What?
What show did you say was the slave version?
Underground. It's about the Underground Railroad.
Once upon a time.
But here it tells them not in it, so they're all plotting together in season 1.
I don't know what I was just watching.
Oh,
I was watching the news this morning, and it was talking about phones, and it was like, if you're being detained or something like that, you don't have to give, it might have been talking about airports. You don't have to give them your password if they ask you to look at your phone. You have to give them your phone, but then they can they'll say 1 minute please, and they'll take your phone to the back, and then they make a clone of your phone, and then they look through all this data and stuff that way.
A clone of it?
Yeah, they clone your phone.
And it has the exact
exact same stuff. They go and they clone your phone.
What rap song is about knowing your very specific rights in case the police pull you over?
Not enough problems.
No. Nah, I mean, you got the one reference over there, but it's all about search and seizure. I mean, it's a very long song about search and seizure. Okay, let's see. We know racial profiling. Let's ask somebody else. Suzanne, what's your release ratio here? How many of them have to be guilty and innocent for you? More than half. More of them have to be innocent. Okay, let's see. Exclusionary rule. Maddox, what does it say?
That the evidence can be thrown out if it's illegally obtained.
All right, and in Matt versus Ohio, Chapin, what happened? Griffin, what happened?
There was thoughts that she was or even some.
They thought she did one thing, she did something else, they arrested her, but they didn't have a what for the something else.
They have warrant.
Didn't have a warrant. Alright, let's see if we can squeeze one more in here. Alright, the death penalty. Alright, is this number 4 or number 3? 3. Okay. Okay. It's alright. Okay, and you can mark it out, and put a 3 there, and no harm will be done. All right, so the English Bill of Rights, our Bill of Rights is based on the English Bill of Rights, which was written in 1688 as a result of the English Revolution, where William and Mary came to power. And so the English Bill of Rights banned cruel and unusual punishment in response to the rack. What happens to you on the rack?
Like, put your head. Oh,
Stretch you until your bones break. Other forms of torture. The British Empire. There's some Google image. When they ruled over India and some Indian guy was accused of something, the empire would bring an elephant along and he'd step on him. He'd squash his head. So there's all kinds of cruel and unusual punishments that have been used over the years. So no cruel and unusual punishment was part of the English Bill of Rights. Okay, in the late 1800s, courts in the United States ruled that the death penalty was not cruel and unusual punishment. Okay, so then we have 2 things right here. Hey, what am I referencing here? Jolly Rancher.
That is Citizens United.
That's right, Citizens United. That's the one that classified corporations as people. The number of people, let's see, for and against the death penalty kind of fluctuates. So it kind of depends on the politics there. Callahan, did I give you a Jolly Rancher on 99 problems? I don't think I did. That's pretty quick. All right. Okay, the NAACP. All right. The NAACP was concerned about race and the death penalty in the 1970s. And they were able to show that African Americans convicted of the same crime were much more likely to get the death penalty than whites convicted of the same crime. And so the court case, if it's Texas, if it's a Texas court case, it's either flag burn or related to sex in some way, homosexuality or abortion. If it's Georgia, it's a death penalty case. So you kind of, when you're trying to learn these things, start making some generalizations. All right, so in Furman versus Georgia, the NAACP, which goes to the courts, you remember, was able to show that it was applied in a discriminatory fashion. A few years later, this is like 1977 or so, 1978, 79, you got a follow-up case. It's also a Georgia case, Gregg versus Georgia. Supreme Court ruled that the death penalty itself is not cruel and unusual punishment, so states that had gotten rid of it could bring it back if they could show it was going to be used fairly, that no group was going to be more likely to get it for having been convicted of the same crime. All right, so for a year or so, there was no death penalty, but it was a pretty short period of time, and then it was brought back. All right. Let's see. So then the question is, what happened next? All right. In 2000, the next big issue that came along is kind of our same deal that we're looking at with Guantanamo. There are instances of people there's a lot of instances of somebody being convicted and given the death penalty, but on appeal, it turns out he didn't do it and they get away. They get let go. But there's a few instances of people getting executed, and then new evidence comes out that makes it look like they were probably innocent. So, in the lynching era, certainly there were a lot of people that were innocent that got executed, that got lynched. But in recent years, there's been cases where we feel like probably we got the wrong person. So in the year 2000, the governor of Illinois suspended the death penalty. All right, and The reason he did, he was a Republican who had always been kind of in favor of the death penalty. He felt like an individual who committed a terrible murder deserved the death penalty, but what he was concerned about was wrongful execution. So he suspended it until Illinois could be sure that they were getting the right people. All right, and the thing that is increasingly used in these cases is the DNA evidence. And increasingly it's the case that the DNA evidence shows that the person that the authorities thought they have is actually not the right person. So DNA evidence and the death penalty are kind of today's issue when it comes to the death penalty. Okay, and well, there we are. All right, and with a minute or two left, I'm going with the group method. What's the name of that English document? Yeah, Bill of Rights. All right, the court ruled that what? Yeah, it's all right. But here, let's throw this one out there because I don't think I got any more death penalty. No, Second Amendment, Nick. So there was a court case about lethal injection, and what's the problem with lethal injections? Lethal injections are seen as, or they were designed to be the most humane form of execution.
Oh, but like shuts down each organ like individually.
It takes a long time.
So we don't know. I mean, so it's a two-step process. Number one, they can like paralyze you and your eyes closed, and so nobody knows what's going on the inside. And then, the rest of the organs shut down. So it could be that somebody's suffering just a whole lot and you just can't see it. Number two, budget crises. They started scrimping on the poison. They started buying the poison from others. They started outsourcing the chemicals for the execution. And you've had a lot of botched executions where it takes a long time. The person's clearly in all kinds of pain. And so for that reason, there's a Supreme Court case arguing that it was cruel and unusual punishment. Now they lost. And so it's still around. But there's been issues coming up with the lethal injection. All right, Furman versus Georgia said that the death penalty was what? Yeah. All right, so Gray versus Georgia said you can have it as long as it's not racist. Illinois governor was concerned about what?
Wrongful.
And so what gets used now? DNA. All right. For Maddox's and other people's viewing pleasure, I haven't watched it for my viewing pleasure as well. Guantanamo, Frontline Guantanamo. Let's see if I have it right here.
I have a question on
There it is. Wait. Yep, it's 40 minutes long. So everything you want to know, all the issues with Guantanamo, watch it. Write me up a little response to it. We'll talk about Guantanamo when you come in next time. Yep.
Is there tests
No. No, your homework is this.
I have a question.
So it's looking like it's Monday at the earliest. I'll just put it that way. What's your question?
If the justice lady that they have in the courthouse, that how she's blind, justice is blind or whatever, and I know that it's like a right so that accused has the right to face their accuser or whatever, but how come it was never set up to where somebody judging like a jury or a judge never sees the race or something of the person being convicted of a crime? Like you can hold a trial without them ever being present in the without that affecting the trial. How come that was never set up that way? If there's so many cases.
I have never thought of that ever.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, but I've never thought of it. Good question.
No, they have.
I'll start thinking about that. I have absolutely no answer. It seems Callahan suggests that seems to involve some logistical problems, right? I mean, that seems like.
Yeah, Get Out was.
I
loved it.
really good.
I was so mad when I went to the girl involved.
Maybe it means you have a half body there.
I never expected that.
And hey, the guy comes running at him because he was a sprinter. He was thinking he was Jesse Owens.
We pulled up like the 12 secrets you didn't realize when you watched it, and that would be
Okay.
Yeah, I never knew that would be the grandpa and the grandma.
Yeah. No, I didn't think of it.